A hospital monitor screams the truth before anyone else does. While 68-year-old Mr. Little flatlines, his daughter Wendy and her smug husband raise cocktails to A Day Without the Drama King. Alone, he wakes into fluorescent betrayal, then follows the trail. The cruel post, the missing coins, his father's watch gone, the lies rehearsed. Grief calcifies into resolve. If they've already planned his funeral, he'll write the ending himself, selling the house they circled like vultures and giving its keys to a family that still believes in love. Not a rampage, just a razor-clean cut. Revenge, spoken softly and final.
The first thing I became aware of was the sound, a steady, mechanical beeping. Too regular to be natural, too cold to belong anywhere but a hospital. My eyelids felt like sandpaper as I forced them open, blinking against the sharp fluorescent light. White ceiling tiles stretched above me in perfect rows, the air thick with a sterile mix of disinfectant and something faintly metallic. For a moment, I couldn't remember how I'd gotten there. Then the heaviness in my chest returned. Not the crushing pain from earlier, but a dull, pulsing reminder. Heart attack. "Mr. Little, you're awake." A woman in blue scrubs leaned over me, her dark hair pulled into a neat ponytail. The name badge on her chest read Teresa Nguyen, RN. Her voice carried the professional calm of someone trained to comfort, but her eyes betrayed a warmth that made me realize just how close I'd come to not waking at all. "You had a heart attack at work this afternoon," she explained gently, checking the monitor beside me. "The paramedics brought you in around noon. You've been unconscious for a couple of hours, but you're stable now." Stable. A word meant to reassure, yet it carried the weight of everything fragile about my 68-year-old body. I swallowed, throat dry. Did you call my daughter?" "Yes," Teresa nodded. "She's listed as your emergency contact. We let her know you were here." Relief washed through me. Wendy would be here any moment, probably pacing in the hallway with that worried frown she got whenever I so much as sneezed. She'd insist on staying the night, curled up in one of those uncomfortable chairs hospitals try to pass off as family seating. I pictured her face lighting up when she walked in, her voice cracking with relief as she said, "Dad, you scared me to death. Don't ever do that again." But Teresa's expression flickered. Just for a second, but I caught it. She said she was busy and couldn't make it right now. The monitor beeped louder as my pulse jumped. "Busy? That doesn't make sense. She doesn't work Thursdays. She usually spends the day doing laundry, cleaning." Teresa's voice softened with pity, the kind of nurses use when they've had to deliver too much bad news. Sometimes family members react differently to emergencies. It can be overwhelming. I shook my head weakly. No, this wasn't Wendy. She'd been terrified of hospitals ever since her mother, Sarah, died in one 3 years ago. Maybe she was panicking at home, calling Jasper to drive her. Maybe she was too scared to walk through the doors. But not showing up at all? That wasn't my daughter. I gestured toward the bedside table. "My phone, please." Teresa hesitated, then slid open the drawer and handed it to me. "Just for a few minutes. You need rest." The phone felt heavier than usual, though it was more likely that my hands were weaker. My thumb swiped across the screen, pulling up the call log. 17 missed calls from coworkers, 4 from my friend Silas. But from Wendy? Nothing. Not even a single text. I pressed her name. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. She always picked up by the second ring. Always. This time, it went to voicemail. "Wendy, it's Dad. I'm at Columbus Community Hospital, room 247. The doctors say I had a heart attack. Please call me back." I hung up and immediately dialed again. Straight to voicemail. I tried a text. "Had heart attack. In hospital. Please call." The message showed delivered, but no dots appeared. No reply. I stared at the screen, my heart aching more from the silence than from the attack itself. Maybe she dropped her phone. Maybe she was vacuuming and didn't hear. Maybe she was in the shower. I clung to the excuses, each thinner than the last, because the alternative, that my only daughter knew and simply chose not to come, was unbearable. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The minutes stretched. The beeping beside my bed seemed to grow louder, syncing with my anxious heartbeat. I forced myself to breathe slowly, the way the cardiologist had taught me after my first scare years ago. But the truth was impossible to ignore. I was alone. I scrolled aimlessly, desperate for distraction, when I saw it. Jasper's Facebook profile. I rarely checked it, but something made me click. The most recent post stopped my breath cold. 2 cocktail glasses clinking on their kitchen counter. The caption read, "Finally, a day without the drama king." The timestamp? 1:47 p.m. The exact moment paramedics were loading me into an ambulance. My hand trembled so hard I nearly dropped the phone. They weren't worried. They weren't coming. While my heart stopped, they were celebrating. And in that sterile hospital room, surrounded by machines keeping me alive, I realized something I'd never dared consider before. My daughter might love what I could give her, but not me. The phone screen glowed in my trembling hands. I stared at Wendy's smiling face, frozen in the contact photo, her hair tucked under the red sweater I'd bought her last Christmas. She had been laughing when I snapped it, pure, unguarded, the kind of moment a father saves to remind himself that all the sacrifices are worth it. But now, that same picture felt like a mockery. No matter how many times I pressed the green call button, the only thing I heard was her recorded voicemail. "You've reached Wendy. Leave a message and I'll get back to you." I left one message, then another, and another. My words grew shorter, more desperate, until all I could manage was, "Please respond." I tried to convince myself this was temporary. Wendy always answered quickly, sometimes too quickly. Checking her phone so often, her husband Jasper used to complain. She'd laugh it off, teasing, "What if there's an emergency with you, Dad? I can't risk missing a call." That memory stung like salt in a fresh wound. The minutes crawled. The little gray checkmark confirmed my text was delivered, but it never changed to read. Every time I refreshed the screen, I expected to see the 3 dots, the tiny promise she was typing back. But the space remained empty. I told myself stories to fill the silence. Maybe she'd dropped the phone in the sink while cleaning. Maybe she'd left it upstairs while folding laundry. Maybe she was wearing those earbuds she used when she scrubbed the bathroom and listened to true crime podcasts. But none of those explanations matched the Wendy I knew. She never left her phone out of reach, not during the day, not after telling me only last month, "Dad, I keep it on loud in case something happens to you. I can't risk missing a call." That memory stung like salt in a fresh wound. The monitor at my bedside registered the spike in my pulse. The beeping quickened, accusing me of panicking. I tried to breathe the way my cardiologist had taught me after my first scare years ago. Slow inhale, slow exhale. But the hollow ache in my chest wasn't physical this time. It was the kind of ache you feel when you realize maybe, just maybe, someone you love isn't who you thought they were. I scrolled through my contacts for another lifeline. My neighbor, Jacqueline, would come in a heartbeat, but she'd want to know why Wendy wasn't there first, And I wasn't ready to answer that question. Silas, my old friend, would show up too, but he was probably in the middle of a real estate showing. I thought about calling Jasper, but the idea curdled in my gut. If Wendy wouldn't answer, asking her husband felt like crossing into dangerous territory. Something in me resisted giving him that power, that knowledge that I was desperate. Instead, I opened Facebook. Wendy's profile was usually a steady stream of updates. Pictures of her cat, new recipes, little complaints about the weather. If she was too busy to call, maybe she'd at least posted something to explain it. Her last update was from 2 days ago, a pan of homemade lasagna, captioned, "Trying a new recipe." 37 likes. Nothing since then. No mention of emergencies, no broken phone jokes, just silence. The silence gnawed at me. I switched to Jasper's page, though I rarely checked it. His updates were mostly sarcastic memes and rants about clients. But maybe today he'd posted something that would tell me why Wendy couldn't come. What I found instead made my stomach turn to ice. A photo of 2 cocktail glasses, their rims sparkling with condensation, sat on a polished kitchen counter I recognized instantly, my daughter's kitchen counter. Bright umbrellas stuck out of the drinks like little flags of celebration. The caption read, "Finally, a day without the drama king." The timestamp hit me like a defibrillator shock. 1:47 p.m., the exact moment paramedics were strapping me to a stretcher, loading me into an ambulance while my coworkers were watching, whispering whether I'd make it. And here were my daughter and her husband, clinking glasses. The room spun. I blinked, but the words didn't change. Drama king. That was me. Who else could they mean? My fingers shook as I screenshotted the post, though I wasn't sure why. Proof, maybe. Evidence that I wasn't imagining this betrayal. The emojis beneath the caption, the laughing faces Wendy herself had once taught me to use, burned into my eyes. Dad, the crying, laughing face means it's really funny. My heart attack was really funny. The monitor beside me beeped frantically as my pulse raced, but I barely heard it. The betrayal was louder, echoing in my skull. While I was dying, they were celebrating. The worst part wasn't even Jasper's cruelty. It was Wendy's silence. No call, no text, not even a message to check if I was alive. I thought back to the money I'd given them. $15,000 for a down payment, $800 for groceries, $1,200 for rent. All the times I'd told myself, this is what fathers do, this is what family means. But maybe to Wendy, family meant something else. Maybe it meant cash handouts and bailouts, not unconditional love. I dropped the phone onto the side table, watching my hand tremble more from rage than medication. The IV line tugged against my skin, reminding me just how fragile my heart was now. Still, I knew this. The silence spoke louder than words ever could. Wendy wasn't coming. And for the first time in 68 years, I realized I might be completely, utterly alone.
The glow of the phone screen painted my hospital room in a harsh blue light. I should have put it down, should have listened to the nurse's advice and rested, but I couldn't. My hand trembled as I scrolled back to the photo, as if staring at it long enough might change the caption or erase the timestamp. But it didn't change. It never changed. 2 cocktail glasses, complete with colorful umbrellas, perched on Wendy and Jasper's kitchen counter. The caption, "Finally, a day without the drama king." 1:47 p.m., the exact moment my heart had stopped for 37 terrifying seconds. The words crawled into my chest like ice. I read them once, twice, 10 times. Each repetition felt like another blow to my ribs. Drama king. I whispered the phrase aloud, as if saying it might strip it of its venom, but it didn't. It cut deeper. I remembered Wendy laughing at my first attempt to use emojis, showing me which ones meant crying and which ones meant crying from laughter. She'd grinned, nudging my arm. "Dad, the crying, laughing face means it's really, really funny." Now I stared at a row of those same emojis under Jasper's post, bright yellow faces with tears streaming down as strangers chuckled at the joke. My heart attack, my brush with death, was really, really funny. My pulse spiked again, the monitor beeping in frantic bursts. I pressed a hand to my chest and forced myself to breathe slowly. In, out, in, out. But the betrayal throbbed louder than the machine. How long had they been talking about me this way? Behind closed doors, over cocktails, calling me dramatic, a burden, something to tolerate until I wasn't there anymore. The screen blurred as sweat pooled in my eyes. I wiped at them with the back of my hand, refusing to let myself break down completely in that sterile hospital bed. Instead, I scrolled through the comments. A handful of their friends had chimed in, neighbors I'd mowed lawns for, people I'd loaned tools to, friends of Wendy's from college. They'd all liked the joke. A couple added laughing gifs. Each reaction felt like a slap. These were people who knew me, knew I was Wendy's father, knew I'd been there at her wedding, her graduations, her every crisis, and still they laughed. The realization burned deeper than the heart attack itself. My daughter hadn't just ignored me, she'd joined in the joke. She had stood by while her husband made me a punchline, while friends and neighbors piled on. I closed my eyes, letting the phone fall against my chest. Memories came uninvited. The Christmas I'd driven through a snowstorm to make sure Wendy's heat stayed on after the gas company threatened to cut her service. The night she'd called sobbing about rent, and I'd emptied $1,500 from my savings to keep her roof intact. The groceries, the car repairs, the little temporary loans that never found their way back. All those sacrifices met with a cocktail toast to my absence. I forced myself upright against the pillows, ignoring the way the IV tugged at my skin. My breathing steadied, but something else inside me shifted, something colder. I'd always believed that family meant unconditional love, that a father's role was to give, to protect, to forgive. I'd told myself Wendy was just struggling, that Jasper was just having a hard year, that if I held on long enough, they'd turn it around. But staring at that post, I realized the truth I'd been too stubborn to admit. They didn't see me as a father. They saw me as a wallet, a walking ATM with a weak ticker and a soft heart. And now, lying in a hospital bed, I wasn't even that. I was just the drama king. A wave of nausea rolled through me. I pressed the call button for the nurse, but when Teresa appeared in the doorway, concern etched on her face, I quickly shook my head. "I'm fine, just need some water." She studied me, clearly unconvinced, but returned a few minutes later with a cup. I sipped slowly, staring past her at the window. Outside, the world carried on. Cars on the street below, clouds drifting lazily across the sky. For everyone else, it was just another Thursday. But for me, something fundamental had broken. I set the cup down with shaking fingers and reached for my phone again, not to call Wendy this time, not to beg for her voice on the other end. Instead, I opened my photo gallery and found the screenshot I'd saved. Evidence, proof of what they really thought of me. As I stared at it, the words replayed in my mind with a cruel rhythm. Finally, a day without the drama king. They thought they'd written the final chapter, that my absence was something to celebrate, but lying there, heart bruised but still beating, I decided they were wrong. The drama wasn't over. Not yet.
The taxi pulled up to the curb just after 10 the next morning. The driver offered to help me out, but I waved him off. Pride, stubbornness, maybe both. I didn't want anyone seeing how much effort it took just to climb my own front steps. From the outside, the house looked unchanged. Same blue shutters, weathered by years of Ohio winters. Same tilting mailbox I'd been meaning to fix. The crack in the walkway that Sarah used to tease me about. All the details of a life lived steadily. predictably. But as soon as I turned the key, I knew something was wrong. The air carried a faint trace of perfume, expensive, floral, and unmistakable. Wendy's perfume. She could never afford it on her own, yet she wore it like armor. I paused in the entryway, listening. Silence. Still the feeling of intrusion pressed on me like a weight. The living room appeared ordinary at first glance. My worn leather chair waited in its usual spot, remote tucked neatly in the side pocket. A stack of engineering journals sat on the coffee table, right where I'd left them. But when my eyes drifted toward the bookshelf, my stomach dropped. Behind the row of World War II histories, the space was empty. My coin collection, 3 generations of rare pieces, including the 1909 penny my grandfather pressed into my palm when I was 12, was gone. I stumbled forward, gripping the shelf for balance. My chest tightened, not from the heart attack this time, but from the sickening realization Wendy had been here. I forced myself toward the kitchen. The coffee canister sat on the shelf, looking perfectly ordinary except for one small detail. It wasn't in its usual place, 3 inches to the left, as if someone had put it back without caring to match my habit. Hands trembling, I twisted the lid off. Inside, the $400 I always kept for emergencies had been cut in half. $200 gone. Not all of it, just enough to test whether I'd notice. My throat tightened. She hadn't even been desperate enough to take it all. She'd been careful, measured, like a thief pacing herself. I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo of the canister, and then another of the empty shelf space where the coins had been. Evidence, proof, the kind an engineer knew to gather before solving any problem. The study door stood slightly ajar. I never left it like that. Never. I pushed it open and went straight to my desk. The bottom drawer, where I kept birth certificates, insurance policies, investment statements, wasn't closed properly. Inside, the papers had been rifled through with clinical precision. Not thrown around, not frantic. Examined, evaluated. My pulse pounded in my ears as I pulled one folder after another. Everything was technically still there, but the disorder told me all I needed to know. She hadn't been searching for quick cash. She'd been assessing value. When I finally staggered into the bedroom, the blow landed hardest of all. The top of the dresser was bare where my father's watch used to sit. A simple Omega, worn smooth by decades of his touch. He'd placed it in my hand the night before he died, whispering, "Take care of this, son, and take care of your mother." To anyone else, it was maybe a few $100s at a pawn shop. To me, it was priceless, irreplaceable, and Wendy knew that. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my body heavy with exhaustion and grief. The mattress creaked under my weight, but the room stayed achingly silent. This wasn't a daughter caught in a moment of desperation. This wasn't a mistake. It was preparation. She'd been cataloging my life like an appraiser at an estate sale, taking what she thought she could sell quickly, studying what she'd inherit eventually. She wasn't waiting for me to recover. She was waiting for me to die. My gaze drifted across the room, noticing smaller things I hadn't at first. The letter opener missing from the kitchen drawer. The good fountain pen gone from my desk. Sarah's jewelry box had been disturbed, though most of its contents were still there. Each absence whispered the same message. You are no longer father, you are inventory. I pressed the heel of my palm against my forehead, fighting the urge to scream. The heart monitor's phantom beeping still echoed in my head, but now it blended with another rhythm, the steady erosion of trust. How many times had I ignored the warning signs? The endless temporary crises, the money that never came back, the manipulations cloaked in Sarah's memory. And still I'd painted those red flags green, too desperate to believe my daughter saw me as anything but her father. Now I had no choice but to see clearly. I rose unsteadily, gripping the wall for support. My legs felt weak, but my resolve sharpened with every step back to the kitchen. I opened the canister again and stared at the missing bills. Half gone, half left. A test. Well, I had my answer. The time for excuses was over. I pulled my keys from the hook by the garage door, the metal jingling with finality. It was time to look my daughter in the eye and see how well she could lie when she didn't know I already knew the truth.
The drive to Wendy's house felt longer than it should have. Only 20 minutes separated our homes, yet every red light, every slow turn of the suburban streets dragged me further into a storm I couldn't avoid. My fingers clenched the steering wheel hard enough to leave crescent marks in my palms. Her rental sat on Oak Avenue, a tired little place with sagging porch steps and a lawn in need of mowing. My house could have swallowed it whole, backyard and all, yet somehow, despite all the help I'd given them, they were still drowning. Through the front window I saw movement. Wendy, in a neat dress, not at all like someone who'd spent the past day grieving her father's brush with death. She looked more like she was preparing for brunch. The front door opened before I even reached it. "Dad!" she exclaimed, voice wrapped in relief so perfectly polished it could have fooled me yesterday. She pressed a hand to her chest in mock concern. "Oh my goodness, how are you feeling? I'm so sorry I couldn't make it to the hospital right away." Her eyes darted to my face, searching for weakness, measuring how much I knew. I stayed near the threshold, not stepping inside yet. "Why couldn't you answer your phone? I called, several times." Her smile faltered only for a heartbeat before she launched into her excuse. "My phone broke yesterday morning. I dropped it right in the kitchen sink. Total accident, you know me." She gave a little laugh, but it rang false. From where I stood, I spotted a brand new phone box on the counter, receipt still tucked beside it. Purchased this morning at 9:15 a.m. If her phone had truly broken yesterday at 10, she'd waited nearly 24 hours to replace it, conveniently after the hospital scare had passed. "Since when do you go an entire day without a phone?" I asked flatly. She fluttered to the curtains, adjusting them, though they didn't need adjusting. "Well, the nurse called our landline. Did you know we still had one? She said you were stable, resting. I figured you'd want me to take care of practical things here instead of just sitting around at the hospital worrying." I studied her face, the slight flush in her cheeks, the way her eyes never quite met mine. "Practical things," I repeated slowly. "That's new. Last time I had chest pains, you wanted to call 911 for heartburn. That was different," she snapped, then softened her tone almost instantly. "You know how you sometimes dramatize situations, Dad. I'm learning to be more rational." The word hit like a slap. Dramatize. The same word Jasper had used online, the same word they'd clearly rehearsed. I stepped past her into the living room, ignoring how she bristled. "Where's Jasper?" "Job interview downtown. That design firm I told you about finally called back." I nodded, eyes drifting back to the phone box. My silence stretched until she fidgeted, her hands twisting the wedding ring around her finger. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked, her voice thick with practiced concern. "You look pale." She touched my arm lightly, as if to reassure me, but the gesture felt rehearsed, more performance than affection. "Heart surgery takes it out of you," I said, deliberately calm. "But I wanted to make sure you weren't too worried. I know how family emergencies upset you." Relief flickered across her face before she masked it. "That's thoughtful of you, Dad. You should probably get home, though. Rest. Don't overexert yourself." The speed with which she guided me back toward the door was almost comical. She wanted me gone before I asked the wrong question, before I saw the wrong thing. On the front step, I paused and looked back. Yesterday, I might have seen a loving daughter concerned for her father's health.
Today, all I saw was calculation behind her eyes. "I'll keep the drama to a minimum," I said. Her smile faltered, the mask slipping just a fraction. "What?" "Nothing," I murmured, stepping away. "Just something someone said." I walked back to my car without waiting for her reply, but I felt her watching me until the engine roared to life. In the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of her pulling out the shiny new phone, already typing furiously, probably texting Jasper, "The old man bought it, we're in the clear." But she was wrong. The crisis hadn't ended. It had only just begun.
The decision came quietly, like a switch flipping in my chest. By the time I left Wendy's doorstep, I knew what I had to do. For 3 years, I'd told myself her pleas were temporary, that the rent money, the grocery money, the car repair money, all of it was just a bridge until she and Jasper got on their feet. But bridges aren't meant to last forever. At some point, they become crutches, and I was done being a crutch. That night, back in my empty house, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the faded wallpaper Sarah had picked out decades ago. Every surface whispered of her, of the life we'd built together, of the home we thought Wendy would one day cherish. Instead, she and her husband had already begun planning its sale, measured it, priced it, parceled it out like I was already in the ground. If that was what they wanted, I would give it to them, but on my terms. Saturday morning, I called my old friend Silas, the realtor who'd been after me to sell for years. His voice was bright and warm, but sharpened when I told him I was serious. "Cash buyers are circling this neighborhood like hawks," he said. "If you're ready, I can have families bidding by Tuesday." "I don't want a bidding war. I want it gone, fast, to someone who will love it." Silas hesitated. "That usually means investors." "Then find me a family," I said firmly. "Someone who deserves it more than mine." By Wednesday, he'd found them. Waldo and Lori Stanley, a young couple with a wide-eyed 4-year-old named Emma who fell in love with the backyard before she even saw the bedrooms. "This house has been cared for," Lori said softly, running her fingers over the crown molding Sarah once insisted we splurge on. "You can tell it's been loved," Waldo added. Through the kitchen window, I watched Emma twirl in the grass, her laughter carrying through the glass like sunlight. Something inside me loosened. Yes, this was who the house belonged to now. Not a daughter who saw it as dollar signs, but a child who saw it as a playground. By Friday afternoon, the papers were signed. $435,000, more than I'd ever expected. Silas slid the cashier's check across the polished table. My hand didn't shake as I picked it up. "You sure?" he asked quietly. "I've never been more sure." That evening, standing on the porch, I pressed the keys into Lori's hands. "Take good care of it," I told her. "We will," she promised, her voice catching. The moment the keys left my palm, a strange peace settled over me. The house was no longer mine, and more importantly, it was no longer Wendy's inheritance. The next morning, I drove past to see the moving truck in the driveway, toys scattered across the lawn, curtains fluttering in new windows. Life already blooming where betrayal had once sat. I almost kept driving. Almost, but fate had other plans. Wendy was there, on the sidewalk, her face twisted with fury as she gestured wildly at the Stanleys. Her voice carried even through my rolled-up windows. "These are strangers in our house. Tell them this is a mistake." I pulled over, stepped out slowly, my heartbeat steady for the first time in weeks. "Wendy," I said, voice calm as a blade, "step away from these nice people." Her eyes widened, rage and panic fighting for dominance. "You can't just sell it without telling me. This was supposed to be mine." I met her gaze evenly. Correction, it was mine, and now it belongs to them. I gestured to the Stanleys, who hovered uncertainly behind me. "Children don't inherit until their parents are dead, and I'm not dead." Her face drained of color. She sputtered, trying to find another angle. "You don't understand the pressure we're under. Jasper and I—" "Stop." My voice cut sharper than I intended. I saw his post. While I was in the hospital fighting for my life, he was toasting to a day without the drama king. And you couldn't even answer your phone. For once, she had no ready lie. "You can't do this to us," she finally whispered. "You did it to yourself." Then softer. "Next time you plan someone's funeral, Wendy, make sure they're actually dead first." The Stanleys ushered their daughter inside, shutting the door behind them. Wendy stood frozen on the curb, her mouth opening and closing like she was drowning on dry land. I walked back to my car without looking back. The house was no longer a prison of memories. It was a gift, handed to people who would honor it. And in taking it from Wendy, I'd given myself something priceless: freedom.
The Cincinnati apartment was smaller, no doubt about it. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a modest balcony that overlooked the slow-moving Ohio River. Nothing like the 3-bedroom house I'd spent 30 years paying off. Yet as I sat at the little kitchen table, sunlight spilling across the crossword puzzle in front of me, I realized I didn't miss the old place. Peace, it turned out, didn't require square footage. 3 months had passed since the sale. 3 months since I handed over the keys to the Stanleys and walked away from everything Wendy assumed would be hers. I thought the silence would crush me at first, the absence of Sarah's voice, the echo of Wendy's laughter from years gone by. But instead, the silence had settled into something else entirely, a kind of calm I hadn't felt since before Sarah got sick. My new routines were simple. Morning coffee, strong enough to wake the dead. A couple of hours with the paper, circling crossword puzzles. Some afternoons I drove out to the lake with my fishing rod, relearning patience in the quiet company of rippling water. Other nights I joined Silas for dinner, and we talked about anything but real estate. It wasn't the life I had planned, but it was the life I had chosen, and that made all the difference. June 15th arrived with a clear blue sky, unseasonably warm for Ohio. I noticed the date before I even looked at the calendar. Wendy's birthday. 36 years since I'd first held her in my arms, swaddled and screaming, convinced she was the best thing I'd ever done in my life. For 36 years, I had never missed a birthday call. Not one. I stared at my phone for a long time before finally pressing her name. It rang once, twice, 3 times. She answered on the 4th, her voice clipped, professional, like she was speaking to a client instead of her father. "Hello, Dad." "Happy birthday, Wendy." A pause. "Thank you." "How are you managing?" I asked. Another pause, longer this time. Then, "We're fine. No thanks to you." I closed my eyes, letting the words land without flinching. "I'm glad to hear you're doing well." And I meant it. For once, I didn't feel the old compulsion to fix things, to reach for my wallet, to patch the hole she and Jasper had dug for themselves. "I won't keep you long," I continued. "I know you're busy." There was a faint sound on her end, like she wanted to argue, or plead, or maybe just lash out, but she swallowed it. "Is that all?" I glanced around my apartment, at the fishing gear leaning against the wall, waiting for Saturday morning, at the stack of books I'd chosen for myself, not bought as gifts or obligations, at the bare shelves, free from the clutter of family photos that once felt like shackles. "Yes," I said. "Just one more thing. Try not to be so dramatic, sweetheart." The silence stretched for nearly 10 seconds. Then the line went dead. She hadn't even bothered with goodbye. I set the phone down, strangely lighter for the first time in years. Through the balcony doors, I saw a young family walking along the river path below. A man pushed a stroller, while a little boy ran ahead, chasing a kite that dipped and soared in the summer wind. Their laughter floated upward, bright and uncomplicated. I thought of the Stanleys, unpacking boxes in the house that used to be mine, filling its rooms with new memories, honest ones. That house was alive again. Not with schemes and entitlement, but with love. And me? I was alive too. Alive and no longer anyone's victim. For decades, I had confused sacrifice with love, convinced that giving until I was empty proved I was a good father. But love without respect is just exploitation. And finally, I had chosen respect for myself. I folded the crossword, poured another cup of coffee, and leaned back in my chair. The Ohio River rolled steadily past, carrying everything downstream: grief, anger, betrayal. Carrying away the man who once believed kindness was weakness. I had been the drama king in their story. But now, I was something else entirely. Not a king, not even a victim. Just a man who had chosen peace over pretense. And for the first time in 68 years, that was enough.
At its core, this story isn't simply about money or property. It's about boundaries, something we often overlook in family relationships. Many of us are taught that unconditional love means endless sacrifice, that being a good parent or a good child means giving without limit. But the truth is more complicated. Hyram spent decades supporting Wendy, always saying yes, always bailing her out. What he discovered was painful. Love without respect becomes exploitation. And no amount of money, no inheritance, no family tie can fix a relationship built on manipulation. The turning point wasn't when Hyram sold the house. It was when he realized that setting boundaries was not an act of cruelty, but an act of self-respect. By selling the home, he wasn't just cutting Wendy off. He was reclaiming his life, his peace, and his dignity. For us, the lesson is clear. Family loyalty should never mean tolerating abuse, disrespect, or exploitation. Sometimes the hardest but healthiest choice is to walk away, even from people you love, because only then can you create space for trust, peace, and genuine connection to flourish. If this story made you feel something, anger, shock, or even a bit of relief, don't just scroll away. Hit the like button to help more people see it. Share it with someone who needs to hear this lesson about family and boundaries. And here's our question for you. If you were in Hyram's shoes, would you have done the same, sold the house and cut ties? Or would you have tried one last time to forgive? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Tomorrow's story is one you absolutely won't want to miss. It's about a daughter who discovered her father's biggest secret only after his funeral, and it changed everything. Until then, take care of your heart, take care of your peace, and remember, respect is the foundation of real love.